For days, I found myself circling back to the same question. How does someone vanish from a quiet Tucson neighborhood without a sound? Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, grandmother, church volunteer, steady presence in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, disappeared as if the desert had swallowed her whole. There were no signs of robbery, no broken windows, no forced entry, just a closed garage door and an unsettling silence. Her family, including her well-known daughter Savannah, initially feared the worst. Was this random? Was it connected to fame? The nation watched as headlines painted Nancy as the gentle matriarch behind a successful daughter. But as investigators began pulling at loose threads, it became clear that Nancy's story was layered, complicated, and deeply human. What unfolded wasn't just a missing persons case, it was a revelation about identity, longing, and the quiet parts of ourselves we rarely share. A life built on strength and routine. After her husband Charles passed away in 1989, Nancy became the anchor of her family. Left widowed at 47 with 3 teenagers, she turned grief into structure. Friends remember her modest ranch-style home as warm and welcoming, filled with laughter despite hardship. She worked part-time as a bookkeeper, volunteered at church, and showed up for every milestone in her children's lives. Her daughter Savannah often spoke publicly about her mother's resilience, describing her as unshakable. To outsiders, Nancy was grace under pressure, the embodiment of steady devotion. But resilience can sometimes look like silence. In her effort to protect her children from more pain, Nancy may have tucked away parts of herself that didn't fit the image of the strong widow. The world saw a woman who endured. Few wondered what she sacrificed in the process. The envelope that changed everything. 5 days after Nancy vanished, an unmarked envelope arrived at Savannah's New York apartment. Inside was a faded photograph from 1992. A younger Nancy standing arm in arm with an unfamiliar man outside a cafe in Santa Fe. On the back were handwritten words. She deserved more than secrets. Ask about Elena. That single name shifted the family's understanding overnight. During an emotional video call, Nancy's children stared at the image in stunned silence. Who was the man? Who was Elena? The date struck hardest, 3 years after their father's death. It wasn't just a clue, it was a doorway into a hidden chapter of their mother's life. Investigators traced the postmark to Santa Fe, and with that, the careful image of Nancy, as solely a devoted widow, began to gently, but unmistakably, crack. A second chance in Santa Fe. In the early 1990s, while attending a church retreat in Santa Fe, Nancy met Victor Ramirez, a gallery owner and artist originally from Mexico City. He had also experienced loss, and their connection was rooted in shared grief. Victor was expressive where Nancy was reserved, spontaneous where she was structured. Their bond deepened quietly. For Nancy, the relationship wasn't about replacing her late husband. It was about rediscovering parts of herself that had been overshadowed by duty. She returned to Tucson, outwardly unchanged, but something inside her had shifted. Over time, occasional trips to New Mexico became a pattern. She told her children she was visiting friends or attending retreats. In reality, she was building a relationship that gave her color after years of gray. It wasn't deception born of malice. It was a search for vitality. Becoming Elena. In Santa Fe, Nancy wasn't simply Nancy. She was Elena, a name Victor affectionately gave her after a character in a novel they both admired. Under that name, she explored creativity and freedom. She helped manage Victor's gallery, occasionally exhibiting her own paintings. She laughed louder, dressed differently, and allowed herself to feel seen not as a widow or mother, but as a woman. Back in Tucson, she resumed her familiar rhythm: church potlucks, birthday cakes, weekly phone calls with advice about staying grounded. The separation was intentional. Nancy seemed to believe her children needed the steady version of her, untouched by change. Yet maintaining 2 identities for decades required emotional compartmentalization. Elena was her oxygen, but secrecy came at a cost. The longer it continued, the heavier it became. The weight of silence. As years passed, Nancy's visits to Santa Fe grew longer. With her children building their own lives, she had more freedom. Yet she remained hesitant to reveal the truth. She feared disrupting their memory of their father or altering the image they held of her. Letters between her and Victor, carefully handwritten to avoid digital traces, painted a portrait of affection, longing, and internal conflict. She described Tucson as responsibility and Santa Fe as breath. Victor encouraged openness, but Nancy resisted. "They see me as their rock," she reportedly told him. "Rocks don't have secrets." That belief reveals something tender and tragic. Nancy equated vulnerability with instability. Instead of trusting her family with her complexity, she chose protection through silence. Over time, that silence hardened into habit. When health and fear intertwined. In her later years, Nancy faced chronic health issues that limited her travel. The pandemic further isolated her, deepening the emotional distance between her two worlds. When she resumed visits to Santa Fe, Victor noticed anxiety in her. She mentioned feeling watched in Tucson and receiving strange calls. Whether those fears were grounded in reality or heightened by stress remains unclear. What is certain is that maintaining secrecy for 3 decades can create tension beneath even the calmest exterior. The envelope sent after her disappearance suggests someone else became aware of her hidden life. Investigators began exploring whether that knowledge connected to her vanishing. While speculation circulated, the focus remained on finding Nancy safely. Beneath the headlines and theories was an elderly woman whose life was far more layered than anyone had known. A family confronts the truth. When authorities confirmed Nancy's long relationship with Victor, her children were left navigating both grief and revelation. Their mother had not been unfaithful in the traditional sense. She had been widowed, but she had withheld a significant part of herself. In private conversations, they reportedly moved between shock and understanding. It's difficult to reconcile the parent you thought you knew with the person they also were. Yet over time, reflection softened some of the initial hurt. Nancy hadn't built a second family, she had built a second self. She had loved her children deeply while also nurturing a private space where she could feel alive beyond motherhood. That realization didn't erase confusion, but it reframed it. She was still their mother, just more human than they'd realized. Public reaction and perspective. As the story unfolded, public fascination grew. Some saw romance in Nancy's decades-long secret, others questioned her silence. But reducing her life to scandal misses something essential. Many widowed individuals struggle quietly with identity after loss. For Nancy, Santa Fe represented renewal. Tucson represented devotion. Both were authentic. The tragedy lies not in her having loved again, but in feeling unable to share that love openly. Fame, family expectations, and personal guilt may have shaped her choice. The investigation continues, focused on facts rather than speculation. What remains undeniable is that Nancy's story resonates because it reflects a universal truth. People contain multitudes. Even those we believe we know completely carry private dreams, fears, and chapters unwritten in the family album. More than a mystery. Nancy Guthrie's disappearance remains unresolved, but her story has already shifted how those closest to her remember her. She was not simply the steadfast widow or the secret Elena. She was both, a woman shaped by love, loss, duty, and longing. If there is a lesson in this unfolding narrative, it may be about the courage to share our evolving selves with the people we love. Secrets can feel protective, yet they can also isolate. As her family continues to search for answers, they are also piecing together a fuller portrait of their mother, artist, partner, protector, dreamer. The mystery of what happened that January night is still under investigation, but one truth stands steady. Nancy's life was richer, more complicated, and more human than anyone ever imagined.